Alright, I know there have been a few questions. A lot of people are saying that they've never used oil pastels before and they're really anxious to get started with the new August 2021 Paletteful Packs, which has a very nice set of 12 oils pastels in it. They're not the best ones I've ever used, but they're certainly not the worst ones I've ever used. They're actually pretty good, and I love the little case. So I've got a couple of tips, just maybe I'm hoping to help you all get started that haven't done oil pastels before. I drew out just a quick little flower with some petals, and I thought I would give you a couple of quick blending tips that I learned when I did oil pastels a couple of years ago. First, it's important to make sure that your pastel is clean. You don't have any colors left on it from last time. And one of the first and best blending tips is that you have to have at least 2 layers to begin blending. So I'm going to start this layer with white because I want the petal to be a little more on the pink side. And I'm going to put the red at the bottom and just at the bottom, and then like watercolor you just kind of blend it out. You keep it thick where you want it darkest. That's another thing, that first bottom layer, it really needs to be a thin, even layer. Don't lay it on thick. I didn't rub real hard. And just like your oil pastel stick, you also need to make sure your blending stump is clean. I usually just find a scrap piece of paper lying around and just rub it until all the color stops coming off. And then it's just like you're coloring with it. I'm starting at the bottom where it's dark and moving upward so that it gets lighter and lighter toward the top of the petal. A lot of times I'm not always going back and forth, but just go in one direction, lift, go in one direction, lift, and that kind of helps give your petal those kind of veins that flowers tend to have. So I wanted the bottom to be a little bit darker, so I'm going to add another layer of red and then blend it upward like I did before. So I'm kind of picking it up and moving it so that I'm not just pulling the red back down, I'm moving it upward. And it gives you a really nice gradient effect. And it's not that hard to do, just a couple of layers and there you go. That's a brush that I use because oil pastels do get little crumbs, and if you try to wipe them off with your hand, you're going to leave streaks all the way across your paper. I have been so frustrated with that many times, and I've learned. Now I've found that blue is often probably one of the better shadow colors instead of black. So I'm going to start out with a dark blue to make the bottom of my petal have more shading. And see, I'm just taking it to the dark, up to the light, and then picking it up. I'm not going back and forth. And you just keep adding layers until it's at the darkness that you're looking for. And I will add a little bit of black just to make the darkest area very dark, but really the blue should be all you would really need. You want to keep the black to a minimum because it will take over very, very quickly. Just maybe a couple of dots of black, blend it, and then see if you need more. It's like putting salt in food. You can add more, but you can't take it out. And if you want the gradient to be even greater, you can add a little bit of white. White is an awesome blender. You don't have to have a blending stump. You can just use white. It's almost like the colorless blender in Prismacolor pencils. It works really well. If you see something on there you don't like, you can use your fingernail or something else to scratch it off with. I'm going to use my fingernail just to make some vein lines in the petal. I did that on the parrot that I did in the Paletteful Pack video. I just made short ones there. If you don't want to use your fingernail, if you don't like getting stuff on your fingernail, you can just use something sharp, but obviously not something so sharp you're going to score the paper. You just want to scrape off the oil pastel layer. When you put down 2 layers, if you scrape like that, whatever your bottom layer is, that's what's going to show. It's never going to go through to the paper. It's going to go through to what the bottom layer is, and that is the highlight that'll show through when you scrape. Alright, so let's try a petal with a different color. We'll go with the blues. I'm laying on a thin, even layer, and again, I'm not going back and forth. I'm going and lifting, going and lifting. Otherwise, you're going to end up with it really thick, and then as you add on layers, it's just going to not work so well. I'd say oil pastels, 3 layers, 4 at the very most is going to blend nicely. After that, it's going to get a little tricky. So just like with the red one, I'm putting the darker color at the bottom. I'm going a little heavier than I did with the first layer, but not too much. And this time I'm just going to blend with the white instead of the blending stump to start. And I'm going from lighter to darker this time as a comparison. I think the dark to light works a little better, that you can just see what effect you're going for and you'll know which one to try, or try both and see which one works better. Alright, I like the smoothness that the blending stump gives, so I'm going to get over it with the blending stump a bit and try to smooth out those edges. The edges on oil pastel are the trickiest because they are kind of chunky and it's hard to get a fine line. So I'm going to try to add a little bit of highlights with the white, and I am really pressing hard here. I'm pressing so hard that little bitty chunks are coming off of the white pastel, and then I kind of gently take the blending stump and rub those chunks in so that they stay really, really thick. That's the best way to get a highlight to show up with oil pastels. You have to go really, really thick. The white pencil that I got in my Paletteful Pack had the tip really broken off way down in there, and so I didn't bother using it. I did use the black though, and you can use that to do a little bit of outlining. Just try to use the very edge right there. It's a little tricky. Outlining and oil pastels don't really do too well. It probably would be better off outlining in the actual color. Now this is a smaller blending stump that I had, and it's been well used, so the point is pretty well gone on it. But if you do get serious about oil pastels, finding blending stumps of different sizes really does help. If you have some really tiny corners you want to get into, they help tremendously. So I'm going to try to just do the edge in the same color as the petal, but yeah, edges and oil pastels, I'm sure there's people that are very, very good at it, but it's something I'm still working on. Something else that did come in the box was linseed oil. Grab it. Refined linseed oil. I've never used this to blend oil pastels before. I've used something similar to try to blend wax-based colored pencils, and it worked fairly well, although it was incredibly time-consuming. So I'm a little curious. I've never done this before. I'm going to try it out and see how well the blending does with the oil. I'm going to go with the pink and the red and the white to make pink. didn't even open it before. It does have an odor, so be aware of that. I'm smelling it here, and it's didn't seem bad at first, but it's pretty strong. So I've got just a tiny bit on my brush. And as a flat brush, I thought it left a lot of streaks and lines, but you know, it did seem like a good way to give an edge to that petal. So it might be good for that. I'm kind of thinking a round brush would have blended better, but I might just like round brushes better. But it did leave a nice edge, and it does leave kind of the streaks if you're going for a flower petal. If you're trying not to make streaks, it might not be the proper thing for you to use. Overall, I was pretty happy with it, and it did seem to dry fairly quickly, even though on the bottle it says it's supposed to reduce drying time. I suppose that must be with if you use it with paints of some sort. But like I say, I am not an expert on linseed oil. I doubt I'll be using it. Trying to see if it has any kind of cleaning instructions, which I didn't see any on the bottle. Well, I hope this helps with your blending with your new Paletteful Packs August 2021. Oil pastels can be a lot of fun, and this little set is an awesome little travel set. Just take your blending stump and your pad and your pastels and you're good to go. Do a little bit of plein air pasteling. I hope this helps you guys. If you have any other questions you think you would like to ask that I might be able to answer, I would be glad to give it a shot. Make sure to like and subscribe. Thank you.